Hi, so I'm Summer, and today I'm going to be talking about Philip Augustus's wall around Paris. Before I get into the wall itself, I did want to cover some background information on both Philip Auguste and Henry II because their disputes between each other are ultimately what leads to the wall being built. So, for starters, who was Philip Auguste? Well, he was the King of France from 1180 until 1223. He was nicknamed Dieudonné, meaning God-given, and he was given this nickname by his parents because they were pretty late in age and they weren't sure if they would ever actually have a son to take over the throne. So when Philip was born, they kind of saw it as a miracle from God, which ultimately decided his nickname, Dieudonné. He was crowned at 14 years old and was the first French monarch to actually call himself the King of France. He transformed France in both power and financial stability. So Henry II was the King of England from 1154 until 1189, which was the year of his death. He was the first king of the House of Plantagenet, and he had many titles, which I'm sure I'm not actually including them all, but these are the ones that I could find. So for starters, he was the Duke of Normandy, the Count of Anjou, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, as well as the Count of Maine. He was also the Duke of Aquitaine, which was a result of his marriage to Eleanor of Aquitaine, and also the Count of Nantes. He also controlled a few other lands, like Scotland, and there are a few more at some points in his life, but I don't think that he ever had any actual titles for these lands. He had 8 children, 3 of which were daughters and 5 were sons, and his children are kind of important to keep in mind because they are highly involved in some of the disputes between Philip and Henry. So they had a lot of disputes over the years. So beginning in 1183, Philip waged war with Henry because Henry's son was married to Philip's sister Margaret. And when he died, she was widowed and there were no children to produce, no children that were produced. So Philip insisted that the dowry be returned. The main reason he wanted the dowry returned was because King Bela III of Hungary had asked for Margaret's hand in marriage. Henry was reluctant, but he did agree. Between 1186 and 1188, Henry's other son, Geoffrey II, died, and Henry stated that he wanted the guardianship of the dowry returned, at least until his unborn grandson, Arthur I, was born. Philip objected, but he also brought up another issue, which was the delay of the betrothal to Alice. So Alice was Philip's other sister, and she was supposed to be married to Richard the Lionheart, who was Henry's son. This led to 2 years of combat, and they did end up making a truce, but it didn't last because Philip found out about Henry and Richard's disheartened relationship with each other, and he kind of publicly exploited that. In 1189, Henry's health began to fail, and Philip and Richard openly joined forces in order to kind of overtake Henry. This resulted in Henry being forced to recognize Richard as his heir, and he ended up dying 2 days later. This slide is just a timeline. It's everything that I just said, but kind of in order. So I just wanted to include it because I thought it was important, especially with the years between 1186 and 1188, because there was a lot that went on between those years, and I just wanted to make sure I included the correct order. So now on to the wall around Paris. Philip had a vision for a strong stone wall to be built in order to provide defense for the city against enemy attacks when he was not around. The main reason for him wanting to build this wall is because he was about to leave for the Third Crusade. And then this is just a picture of what we have left today of the Wall of Paris. I believe this is a portion of the right bank, which I will get into a little bit later. So, as I said, in that last picture, it was a portion of the right bank. So as far as for strategy, Philip wanted to build the right bank before he built the left bank of the wall. And this was because the Duchy of Normandy was in the hands of the Plantagenet dynasty at the time. So Philip assumed that a attack would be more likely to come from the northwest region before anything else. So the right bank was built between 1190 and 1209. And then a little bit later, but also while the right bank was still being built, the left bank was built between 1200 and 1215. The wall also needed to be strong and not allow easy access for enemies to get through. And he also wanted to add in the Louvre Castle for additional defense. The wall would be paid for by the city, and I thought this was interesting because it cost about 14,000 livres, which in the 13th century was only, I think, 12% of the king's annual income. So he could have easily paid for it himself, but he was a resourceful king and used the resources around him. As far as tactics, the wall must be strong and reinforced in order to keep the enemy out. It must be long enough to cover a large area of land and tall enough to keep enemies from just being able to simply crawl over. It also needed to have bastion towers in order to defend the city from assault by river. So there were 4 of these towers, each being, I think, 24 meters high with a 10-meter diameter. So the Tour du Coin was on the west side of the right bank. The Tour de Nesle was on the west side of the left bank. The Tour Barbeau was on the east side of the right bank, and the La Tournelle was on the east side of the left bank. And also to kind of aid with more defense from assault by river, he added in some heavy chains across the river. So this would kind of prevent enemies from just being able to open water swim. It needed to also have gates to get to and from the city. There were 15 of these gates, which obviously, with gates being open and closed all the time, that's going to cause some heavy traffic. So Philip added in some posterns in order to improve the traffic flow, but they were still able to be walled up in case of emergency. So when I was doing some research on this and I was reading about the posterns, it brought me back to my childhood, and I used to read like all of these fairy tales, and I would watch movies about these fairy tales, and they would have like a princess inside the castle, and a moat would be built around the castle with a drawbridge that could go up and down. So it would be placed down when people were trying to get in and out of the castle, and it was okay. But if the princess was in danger or there were just enemy attacks on the castle, then they would put the drawbridge down, or put it up, sorry. They would put the drawbridge up so that they could prevent the enemies from easily being able to get to and from the castle. So I just thought that was interesting to point out that that's what I kind of thought about. And obviously, it was a little bit different in this scenario, regarding like how it was built and all of that, but it's a similar idea. So these are my references. And this last slide is just giving credits because I did use a free online slide template because I just thought the maps were pretty fitting for this course. So I wanted to give credits to the authors that did make this slide. All right, thank you. I really hope you enjoyed my presentation.